Hello, everybody. This is the first edition of Media News4u Dastaan Hub Festive Stories. Now, these talks are about festive stories, as in, it's about how brands are using festive shopping opportunities strategically and not just tactically. And we are kicking off with Cadbury as a marquee case study in this space. We will chat with Mr. Anil Viswanathan, who is VP Marketing Mondelez India, and Ganpati Balagopalan, who is Head of Strategy at Ogilvy. So welcome, Anil, and welcome, Ganpati.
Thank you, Shripad, for having us. Very excited to be here.
Thank you for having us.
I thought placing Cadbury Dairy Milk and actually Cadbury in the mithai basket was a very big idea. It not just expanded the chocolate market for Cadbury as the leader, but it has been a huge connect with the people of India. Broadly speaking, if I were to look at this entire campaign, it has 3 milestones, is how I saw it. The first was when you all looked at being part of the celebrations. Actually, celebrations, the full gamut, like graduation, job promotion, family time. You also very nicely incorporated finding love in it, very, very, very nicely through various campaigns. The second stage or milestone was when you brought in the festive celebrations, and which obviously are very, very big mithai occasions. And the third one is where you extended the goodness and generosity, where you very nicely again kept the Kuchh Meetha ho jaye by saying Kuchh Acha ho jaye, Kuchh Meetha ho jaye. It's so nice and rhyming and seamlessly syncing. And I still remember, Anil, the first time when I saw it on air, my reaction was, oh God, this is going to be an uphill task. How can you put a chocolate in mithai? So what was the trigger and how did you change this habit in a sense which was over generations? If you can just enlighten us.
Sure, Shripad. Of course, Ganpati and Ganpati, whom I call Guns, I think have been through the journey. So it's nice to kind of go back and, it's a sense of nostalgia for us as we kind of look back at that journey. And you're right. I think it's when the conversations began back in Cadbury House. Of course, the feeling was that it could be a daunting task. It could be a task which may or may not work. Sweets, in as much as they are iconic and integral to our life, there are also several inviable aspects of sweets where you would feel that, oops, how can a modern multinational brand enter? So those were, of course, questions that we had in our minds. And in fact, the first few steps were missteps, Shripad. So, when we started the journey, especially from an advertising standpoint, while we all instinctively felt that it is a very, very relatable and hence the right strategy to take forward, the first few steps are actually missteps. So to your point, we were actually even more apprehensive in early 2000s.
Okay.
We were crafting the strategy together, saying, will it work or will it not? I think as we often say, and Ganpati can give a little bit more context on how we got to this place and the kind of the articulation of the core insight of Kuchh Meetha ho jaye. One of the things is when you hit upon something, if you have the question in your mind of saying, why didn't we do this all the while ago? Or conversely, you then look back at the work you've done in the past and then discover it always existed. We just didn't call it out. Those two things give you a little bit of a penny drop moment to say that, it always existed. We just kind of refining it and bringing it in a manner which is now inspiring and which will now inspire behavior. So those are a couple of facets I thought I'll kind of set up, and maybe Guns can share a little bit more context to how we overcome the kind of the apprehensions.
Right. Like Anil was saying, the Kuchh Meetha journey actually precedes the time when we got around actually calling it Kuchh Meetha. It also precedes me on the brand. But there was Khane Walon Ko Khane Ka Bahana Chahiye, which is a campaign which ran late 90s, early 2000s. And that was essentially aimed at getting traditional India to accept chocolates. So the whole idea then, and if you go back to those commercials which had Cyrus Brocha in it, they were aimed at making chocolate seem like something which you could eat every day, and encouraging people to pick up a chocolate a lot more often. So you positioned it visually at least like meat. It was put in a thali, it was shown in the context of a wedding, it was shown in context which would typically entail consuming meat. Right, so it was there, but we didn't call it out as Kuchh Meetha back then. So at some point, I think we got around to saying that if we really want to explode this market and mithai behavior being so huge in this country, here is an opportunity if you could get people to think of chocolate also as meetha, and then get some share of those mithai occasions. That would be fantastic, and that's pretty much what got started us on the journey. And there's this whole phrase, right? Mo meetha karna, when you sweeten others' mouths to help them, include them in your happiness. That's what festivities and celebrations are all about. So that set the ball rolling. Of course, I mean, it's a journey. You can't get into occasions where there are sweets which are prescribed for it as part of tradition. So we started in more neutral occasions like Papu, which we'll speak about, which is passing of an exam, and then we did it in a fun way. And then the journey kind of evolved over the years, right? Over the decades.
And coming back to the question on how did it happen, I think, as I was telling you, Shripad, the first few steps were a little bit of a misstep because, yes, we knew we needed to talk about celebratory occasions. We wanted to make those moments special with a sweet, right? So to Gans's point on Mumitha Kijiye, or it's an event worth celebrating with something sweet. In the initial few expressions, we had picked up moments that were slice of life, that were part of a consumer's life. But yet, till as much time that we got to Papu Pass Ho Gaya and we got to a very, very universal occasion, the unlock there, Shripad, and that's where the journey actually began, was the fact that we needed to pick up actionable moments that consumers are able to relate to, and moments that are worthy of celebrating. So one huge aspect of unlock was actionability. And the second unlock, almost the flip side of actionability, is really the fact that creating new behavior is always difficult. Riding on current behavior is much easier. So even as you think about the behavior change of switching from sweets to chocolate, the underwriting behavior is something that exists as against something that you want to create. So I think these two aspects became critical in the journey to begin, and people to start accepting and actually demonstrating that instead of celebrating with something sweet, let me celebrate with chocolate. Now remember, this is the early 2000s. Some of us were in college, and the whole notion of celebration and giving a treat was at that point in time very, very common. And at that point in time, obviously none of us had those kind of lavish budgets to go to a restaurant. So the best thing you could do is to go to a neighborhood store and have a treat or treat your friends. So again, that behavior existed. So you have existing behavior, you have openness for the consumer to say, can I accept something which is a more modern expression of a traditional sweet? So a few things came together. The actionability bit is, I think, is a very interesting point that we should keep in mind for the listeners of this podcast to say, if you're aiming to drive behavior change, pick up something that is actionable.
Yeah, I think those two critical things that Anil mentioned. We started with a misstep. I mean, we tried to create meta moments by picking on little happy moments, small joys, and asking people to pick up a chocolate on those occasions by calling ourselves meta. But we realized people wouldn't act on those small occasions. You're not typically going to consume mithai on those occasions, then expecting them to pick up a chocolate also won't work. And then going back to actual mithai occasions and saying, here is when it could have easily been a chocolate, that actually unlocked it. So finding behavior is to become part of culture rather than trying to transform or change culture. That was one of the big things that got the ball rolling. I mean, you get down to changing culture somewhere along the line, but first you have to get the license. So that was the first big thing that kind of got the ball rolling. Second thing is to have the courage to keep going even when things don't succeed at first. Right? It's very tempting to throw the baby in the bathwater. The first attempt wasn't so successful. To Cadbury's credit, they persisted with Kuchh Meetha as a strategy, and it's gone on for multiple decades now.
Yeah, and I think possibly the last bit that I'll add is having gotten that actionable uh, uh, insight, and thus starting the journey. I think, and then staying committed, as Gun said, I think is a huge thing, and not in as much as retrospective logic, but even the journey, and because we were there in the journey, we can confirm. I think our approach has always been this notion of fresh consistency. So we stayed consistent on the strategy. So because it, as you mentioned in your setup question, that it takes time and behavior change doesn't happen overnight. And yet you need to keep telling stories in a refreshing way, because consumers do get bored of hearing the same story. So how can we tell the same story, or bring the same strategy alive, or the same creative insight alive in the context of new stories? I think was the journey then that began in 2003, 2004 and stayed the course. In the course, somewhere around 2007-8, we also went in and did a seminal study, and that study continues. And every 5 years we tend to do that study, where all of us basically, with the help of professional psychographic practitioners, go to the field and meet and endorse, a diverse set of people to really understand what's happening. Which are the areas where chocolate has gotten in, which are the areas that still hasn't found acceptance? What are those insights? What are those occasions? And we created what we internally called it the Meetha wheel. And it was a huge, almost like a menu card of insights, which said, okay, let's try and see which are those insights that we can pick up, test, convert into inspiring stories, right? So I think that, again, just adding on to the chapter to say that's the way we wrote those stories. And one of those parts of the Meetha wheel, Shripad, to almost set up the conversation, was festivals, right? To say that, if at all there is something that is a very, very critical part of an Indian's life, is festivals. An integral part of festivals is Meetha, integral part of the festivals is friends and family, shared good feelings, and which is really, really incredibly important. And if you were to think about a unique part of our culture, which makes us unique compared to the rest of the world, is the fact that they continue to play an important role even in the 21st century, even in our urbanized lives. We all migrated to different cities. We are now, embracing different cultures. But yet, this facet of festivals bring people together, bring in a notion of celebration, feeling a sense of goodness. I think then became a very important chapter of Meetha.
And also when you put it in occasions like festivals and celebrations where the consumption context is social, it gives something that's not consumed as a daily part of your life, or it's not something that you accept because it's not a part of your, it's an alien treat in that sense. Then this creates acceptance. The social context creates acceptance.
Fantastic. So, I should confess that being someone who consumed the Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye campaign in the regional market, Sweet Edu Kondadu was the one which was in TN. Generally, movie phrases used by comedians are something that becomes as a relatable day-to-day conversations. But this particular tagline, Sweet Edu Kondadu, is even today being used as a tagline for any moment to celebrate. So when beyond chocolate, anyone nowadays, even in office or any occasion to celebrate any moment, they use this tagline, Sweet Edu Kondadu, is something which is being used by across. So that's the kind of recall that this campaign was able to generate. Even, of course, we have our own issues in terms of national campaigns that are being planned for the entire, national market. When it comes to reaches to the regional market, it has in many campaigns had its own issues in terms of reaching to the regionalization or the localization issues. But this one is a perfect thing, that best example of a perfectly done localization actually. So I just want to ask you, how do you plan for the festivals throughout the year? If you can tell us how it works? What is your strategy behind for?
Yeah. And one of it goes back to the point we were making in response to Shripad's earlier question. Even in the way we've picked up festivals and celebrations, the journey has been to start with the most actionable ones, right? And pick up the ones which is where actually people go out and celebrate, which are the largest occasions. And the two of the biggest ones that we found was Rakhi and Diwali. So right through and not just in terms of the Kuchh Meetha ho jaye and the messaging, but also in terms of where does gifting of sweets happen, and which are those big moments, and across from a pan-India standpoint, and for us to create scale in the early days, you have to look at pan-India, right, rather than just looking at a particular region. So the two largest actionable occasions we saw was Rakhi and Diwali, right? Rakhi because it's a unique festival, largely siblings, and in the siblings, the ritual is built when you're young. That's when it's most memorable, most enjoyable. There's a little bit of mischief, there's a little bit of naughtiness. It's memorable, and households then carry those memories as they grow up. But really, the beginning of Rakhi in the early days when children are young becomes very interesting. And then, of course, Diwali being such a large occasion across the country. So that's how we began. In late 90s, early 2000s, we had already started articulating the fact that Cadbury could get in, and how a Cadbury gift box could easily substitute or become an additional consideration as a modern sweet, but a box of modern sweets. So that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, almost like a parallel journey to the Meetha journey, right? We felt that, and we saw that consumers were willing to accept sweets. In many ways, Rakhi easily so, because again, the youngsters, and for youngsters, chocolate again is part of their repertoire, right? It's almost like the special treat for them. So we found much faster traction in Rakhi. Diwali, of course, is an ocean. And even today, we are a drop in the ocean, because there's so much that happens in Diwali. There are so many things from food and non-food, packaged, non-packaged, that comes in. But yes, over a period of time, even in Diwali, right, and the approach is slightly different. If in Rakhi, the product found easier acceptance, in Diwali, the emotion found acceptance. And we started through the emotion, and we started to take share of the occasion by executing very well and making our product distributed well, making our product acceptable from a value standpoint, building a premium chapter there and creating a premium leg. So we tried to cover Diwali in a different way, Rakhi in a different way, but those two began the journey. And then over the years, building these and then discovering newer occasions, right? And again, it's a very interesting, it's a very interesting thing, right? You call it a festival, right? Consumers might call it an occasion. And today in a teenager's life, Valentine's Day is as big a festival, an event, a momentous chapter in their lives, a milestone in their lives. Right? And now we felt that from a category standpoint today, about 7-8 years, maybe almost 10 years back, we started the Valentine's Day journey. And today it's become as big as Rakhi, right? So strategically also makes a lot of sense. It's the first quarter of the year, very different from the festivals. So we started activating Valentine's, and now it's become so huge. So in many ways, it is as big as a festival, right? And then the second big festival, I mean, which we are on right now in Q2, which is IPL, in as much a festival, right? It's an unmissable occasion where, I know, Mananath, you and me are not very happy with the performance of Chennai Super Kings, but still, right? But still, it is an event that it's all pervasive. It permeates every Indian household. And, 7:30 in the evening on a weekday, people are back from work. It now creates conversation. People look forward to. So I think when you look at festivals, we need to look at it beyond just religion. Look at it as those that bring families together, create a certain ritual, or maybe an important lifestyle event, right? Which allows us to mark, own, build our emotions, build our unique category aspect that makes us own that occasion in a very unique way. So maybe that's the context that I'll set. Maybe Guns, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that the whole thing we spoke about, this whole thing of the collective giving sanction, that is very important to us. So it's been a confidence building journey, right? We started with neutral occasions, which are like passing of an exam, where you want to include friends and family in your happiness by sharing sweets with them. And then it moved to celebrating payday, then subsequently Diwali, because you feel emboldened enough to now think to see that people are accepting chocolate on mithai occasions. And then celebrations really, occasions like Diwali and Rakhi are really where a lot of this gifting and eating consumption of sweets happens. Like Anil said, Diwali is an ocean. So you found yourself feeling bold enough to kind of play in that, and the halo of this whole Meetha strategy kind of helping us with the celebration story really, really well. And then it's taken a life of its own. So celebratory occasions have kind of grown with time. Rakhi being at the core of it, and subsequently Diwali, and then newer occasions which are more modern, where we're creating newer celebrations like IPL, like Valentine's Day, and so on and so forth.
I think, maybe the last point I'd like to make on this topic is what I was telling Shripad. We do these studies. So the most recent study that we did, the third chapter of this deep ethnographic study we did just about a few months back. And one of the very interesting things that we discovered, which makes chocolate so universally accepted and democratic, is that it is able to transcend. It has currency across all facets of the country. It almost becomes a unified currency for something that can be transacted across religion, social strata, culture, the spectrum of conservatism to traditionalism. It's something that, what's happening in India today is that every festival is being celebrated by everybody. Right? So the four of us could be meeting for a celebration on Tuesday for an iftar party, right? And the question then comes saying, what do I take? Right? We don't know each other's cultures. Right? We don't want to get wrong. Right? And possibly what is emerging is the most accepted and most enjoyable or where you will definitely not go wrong is a box of chocolate. So I think that's what is making us very excited by the future potential of the kind of festivals that we can expand our business and grow the category.
So chocolate is the most democratic mithai that is.
Absolutely. I think that's a very big point, as big an idea as the original one of, placing a chocolate in the mithai box. That's actually a very big perspective, and I'm sure that is helping you all. So, linked to it, I just wanted to understand now. India is like, festivals. I'm just talking of only festivals now. Yes, you did mention that all celebratory occasions, where there is some kind of a call to action and acceptability is surely there. But you have Onam, you have Navaratri, you have Ganapati here.
Pongal.
And yeah, of course, there is Pongal, which is big. So, did you look at these as special opportunities with the regionalization focus, obviously, because then your connect could be good, and probably that's the next stage of emotional connect. Would you do? What are your thoughts on that?
I think there are two facets that you're referring to. I think we go back to the consumer and say we pick up whichever festivals where we think they could be actionable. Right, and which is actionability. So I think hence, if there is a strong culture of going to people's homes and people celebrating with each other, and there is a role, and that role can be opened up, we do. We do know that the harvest festivals are not necessarily like those. Harvest festivals were actually very, very important, where it's a little bit more closer to humankind and nature. And you're thankful for nature, and you're thankful for your family, right? That you had a bountiful harvest, not necessarily where it is celebratory and social. So you realize
probably harvest, especially around the New Year's one, is for getting the high value durables. Then probably, that's probably.
Probably you have a bountiful harvest. You know that you're going to have a good season. Maybe then you make a few investment choices. So some other brands could own it. Ganpati has enough gray hair building occasions with Asian paints. I'm sure he can tell a lot about those occasions there as well. Maybe that's for another podcast. But I think going back to your core point, When it comes to regional, I think again, we have to go back to the region and understand how can I build an entry into that region. It could be through a festival, it could be through communication, it could be through product, it could be through an activation. So I think we have to think through. Fortunately, there is so much variety in our regions. Unfortunately, it means that we have to create separate activities. But really, it cannot be one size fits all, right? So I think that's possibly the only build that I will add to. How do we open regions? In some cases, we have tried, different strategies, right? There is a very unique. So we had Diwali, and we know that Diwali, the way it is celebrated in the south, especially in Tamil Nadu, is very different, right? So many years back, we tried picking up Tale Deepavali and one very specific aspect of Deepavali, which is Tale Deepavali, the first Diwali after marriage. And we created, we really enjoyed it. I think we still feel that comms is very powerful. But is that moment actionable enough? Is it large enough in the larger context of Diwali? Is it the biggest festival? It happens only once in a couple's life. So how does it convert itself into something that can be owned over a period of time? So those are the kind of things. So, but I'm just giving an illustration of the way we can go to. We have, many years back, many years back, you had a wonderful, not very well known, as popular, because those are the days of pre-social media. You had a wonderful communication on Dasara, Durga Puja with Swamita Sengupta and Vidya Balan. Beautiful ad. So I think, again, the question really is to say actionability, right? So one is to make the really endearing creative, because in festival, celebratory occasions, deep connections, you can write a lot of nice stories. Which ones become actionable, become the way we want to take it. And region is beyond just festivals, is the point I want to make sure.
Right. I think the fact that there's such a diverse country with so many unique celebrations which are specific to different geographies creates its own complication. When you're a big brand, or any brand for that matter, you want scale and you want to make it as simple as possible to execute your brand idea in a way that it is able to impact the largest number of people. So between the various media challenges of being able to be specific to a geography and being able to manage all the resources, there's always a challenge. But then, it's a journey that brands make. We've tried it on various occasions, and some of those initiatives are gradually being kind of expanded upon.
From a regional activation standpoint, possibly the most successful experiment of ours was the Mishti campaign. We call it Mishti, or Cadbury Mishti Shera Shishti, we used to call it earlier. It's now in its 10th year, 10 years of association. Again, a very unique way. I think the point that you were making, Manath, earlier, Sweeted Kondad in South worked. Kuchh Meetha ho jaye didn't work, or Mishti Mukh hoye jaye, which was the Bengali expression, didn't work. I was just saying that Mishti Mukh hoye jaye in East didn't work. It wasn't colloquial enough. Now the question is, how do I get to Mishti? And in the way in the East was by tying up with the Mishti chains. Now that's again a very interesting couple of strategic contexts, right? So one is, we had a wonderful partner in Ananda Bazar Patrika, ABP, who've been our partners for the last 10 years, along with, of course, our agency partners who continue to be there. But, ABP played a very critical role, because they said we wanted to be cultural change agents. And they were looking at brand partners through it. They wanted to drive cultural change in the Western region. They did that with, continue to scale up with, say, Sharad Shamman in Durga Puja, and the way how that has picked up huge scale. It's almost become like a cultural festival of a very large scale, where the whole country is looking at it. It's no longer a festival of the East, it's a festival of the nation. And the other bit that we picked up there was sweets. And the fact that traditional sweet makers in the East, which are like in every store, in every street almost in the East, were kind of stuck in the past. Very strong cultural heritage, but not really having the kind of the levers or the wherewithal to kind of pick up scale and become much bigger. And then we said, okay, we wanted to get in there. So I think that's the journey that we said. So through ABP and the Mishti chains, we got it. And the simple idea there was, get into the sweet, get into the Mishti, not through a message, but through the product. So we said, hey, sweet chains, we want to partner with you. So again, it was not about, hey, chocolate is going to come and change the landscape of the East. That's never going to happen, right? You need to get into the sweet. So we said, make a chocolate sweet. Let people eat it. We'll celebrate the best sweet every year. And then we created a thematic layer to it, either by associating with all things that are popular in the East, politics, football, movies, music, and we created several chapters of that. But at the core of it was creating chocolate sweets. Now, I don't know whether both of you visit the East, but if you do, and if you've been going over the years, go to your favorite sweet shop, and you will not find, or you will find that there's always a section on chocolate. There's always a chocolate sweet section. Now, that we believe is a big victory for us. We've now gotten the taste of chocolate seeded in the Bengali household, which wasn't the case set at 15 years back. Now, you've seeded in the chocolate taste, then you have to bring in the brand, bring in our activations, and then the rest of the machinery has to fire. And we've seen a dramatic jump in penetration of chocolate in the East. So I think, again, a different expression of how we can build and grow the strategy without using communication at all.
So as you'll see, I mean, communication can't do it all, right? Communication kickstarts a certain thought process in people's head where you get people who have not seen a product as mithai to see it as something you could consume on similar occasions. So you got them to see it as meetha, and then you have to go beyond, and that's what the Mishti work did really. When you, instead of challenging culture, you became a part of that culture. Here is a large sweet eating culture, and then you got people to include chocolate in that culture by trying to experiment with chocolate over there and making it becoming a part of that culture. And then that's kind of given it a new lease of life and acceptance, which would have been otherwise hard to find.
See, actually, he was, I mean, both Anil and Ganpati were talking about the Misty thing to connect with the Bengal audience while it worked for TN. So that is a kind of adjacencies that you have creating a new portfolio kind of thing, moving away from the existing kind of thing. And I think similarly, you have connected well with the Oreo by today. Even you can see the Oreo finding places in the menu cards of the milkshakes and all that actually. So it's a kind of extended version of the core product. So it's a kind of a portfolio. So would you be looking at expanding such kind of agencies and also tell us the success story of such kind of initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to food, Manath, the reality is that you need to seed the taste and own the taste. Right. So I think, and you know that seeding the taste and owning the taste happens early in the life. The two big intervention points are one when you are young, what's given to you by your parents at home, and the second is when you're just getting independent, you have your own pocket money, you start making your own choices. They are the 2 points of entry, as we say. Right? And through these points of entry, we try and seed the taste. Seed the taste of chocolate. We want to own the taste of chocolate. We own that over the last few years. I mean, last 70 years in the country, 70 odd years in the country. But it's generational, right? So every generation needs to be seeded in. So that's the task that we need to do. And then, of course, similarly, as you're saying, whether it's a taste of Kuchh Meetha, whether it's a taste of Oreo, it all operates in the same realm. Get people to seed the taste. And today, as consumers are getting more and more exposed, the big learning for us for the last 3 years. That's how Mondelez has changed our kind of global outlook and outlook within the country. We want to talk broader snacking. We want to be the snacking powerhouse. We want to be snacking leaders. And anything that is between meals is a snack. We've been guilty in the past of calling ourselves, okay, this is chocolate, this is biscuit. And quite often as manufacturers, we say, okay, this is what it means by chocolate. This is what it means by a biscuit. But who says so? Consumer wants a very nice expression. They want a snack. They are not bothered by definitions. They're not going to the shop and saying, I want a coated wafer biscuit. They want a tasty chocolate snack, for example. Which is why if you go to a shopping market today or shopping aisle today, the single largest performing flavor across many food categories is chocolate, from milk food drinks to breakfast cereal, to the dessert section, to ice cream, and to the core categories like biscuits, chocolate, etc. So the boundaries keep getting diffused. The challenge for us is to not get caught up in boundaries. And how do we offer everything that the consumer wants? Now, of course, there are certain things that we can make and do, and some things that we can't make and do. And that's where partnerships come in. That's why if you ask somebody from Unilever today, the fastest selling cornetto is the Oreo cornetto. The fastest selling chocolate tub, the ice cream tub is the Cadbury tub, right? And that's how we are building partnerships there and growing it there. Similarly with bakeries and startup brands, that's obviously a way that we feel that we can see the taste. Their commerce is not the motive, but really owning the taste is the motive. So I think definitely you would see that both us getting into adjacent categories that we have core competency in directly or through partnerships will continue to be afforded. And then, of course, examples like Mishti, which are not necessarily commercial in nature, but where we are trying to create relevance for the category or seeding the taste in a different way.
So it's not enough to say your Meetha, people need to be able to experience it as Meetha. That happens through initiatives like Mishti.
Well, it's just coming back to the whole thing of using festivals strategically. I want one view of, do you think this entire festive moment marketing of sorts with the right cultural context, do you think it is a strategy that a lot of digital first brands or startups should use? Do you think they are using it right strategically, or do you think they are too much into tactical and trying to be viral? What do you think? What are your views?
I think, and Ganpati can add because he possibly is much more exposed as well in working with multiple categories of brands. But from my perspective, Shripad, definitely any brand can, right? Any brand which is in the business of selling food or non-food, from a retail perspective, and that's where e-commerce comes in, right? From an e-commerce perspective, it is also where collectively festivals are being created, right? And it's also becoming a huge activation opportunity, right? So I think the way e-commerce is evolving, whether it is our festivals or their festivals, so their big day or their 11/11s, right? So 11/11 in China is a festival, right? If you're going to generate billions of dollars of revenue. So I think, or Black Friday, I think these are all big, they've become retail festivals. So it becomes very important for any brand to participate, for the existing brand, for a new brand more so, because that's a great opportunity for them to enter households, right? So they again have to think about it strategically. Of course, you get into the discount, and if you get into the war or a price war, then you're doomed, right? And I'm sure everybody feels that, and people are figuring out their own strategies of managing it. So I think, to your point, can small digital first brands do it? Yes. To your point, to add another acronym is, for all the holistic, actionable, personalized at scale opportunities is what digital can provide, right? To say that I can send Shripad a personalized gift during Diwali, also knowing the tastes that Shripad and his family have got, to know that he likes fruit and nut and maybe his wife likes crackle and maybe his children like something else. That's the amount of personalization that is possible, right? So I think that's what data allows us to do. That's the kind of personalization we can do. And then, of course, again, personalization can also help us unlock small opportunities, which for us as large marketers, we look for scale opportunities, right? You can generate scale in Gujarat for Garba, or or Chhat Puja in Bihar. I mean, these were earlier one would assume that not scale enough for a large national brand to be interested in, and it's only the domain of small brands. But today, that's what digital marketing can allow us to do. And actually, our consumers are expecting us to engage for those moments and not leave them as something that are not important enough. We can't afford to say that, right, to a consumer today.
So, Anil, I could understand from the whole flow that the urge to connect with the consumer at different point of level is reaching a hyper local level. So obviously the brands try for a brand like Mondelez, a company like a national brand, which always designs its campaign at a national level. What do you take some specific efforts to reach out to the regional market? So for the process of localization, and you also quoted that in Misty campaign, you got the excellent support from the local media platform. So do you see in that process of hyper-local connectivity, the role of media platforms of that particular region having a greater say, and will you be looking forward to associate with them at a larger level going forward?
Of course, I think goes without saying, as markets become bigger and bigger and our businesses grow, they also get to a certain scale where we then can create something without creating significant complexity. I think it's always a complexity versus scale battle for us. We don't want to create complexity when none is required. So if I get a universal insight, what you also get is a powerful force that inspires the whole nation, and then it is self-fulfilling. It fuels itself. Right? If I then have to create 28 different such fuel machines, then it's obviously going to come at a certain cost of complexity. So we wouldn't want to create complexity when none exists. So only when there is something where we feel that we cannot unlock is when we will try and go. Even in a national or a large activation, Manath, we do work today with the local media platforms because the last mile is always their specialization, right? So they are anyway an integral part of the overall ecosystem. There could be specific unlocks for specific parts of the portfolio, or specific times of the year, where we think there will be even more strategic role to be played by them, like the Calcutta example. That is, something that we do in the first quarter of the year, right? Leading up to Poila Boishakh, which is their new year, right? That's what we do every year with ABP for that Mishti activity. But does that mean for the rest of the 9 months we don't have any other partners or we don't work? Of course not. So I think depending on the role, the objective, we find partnerships. But definitely that's the norm of the day. Regionalization is, everybody see it, right? And look at what's happening to OTT. So we'll go where the consumer goes.
Now, I think I want to come to the third stage of the Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye, where you have added very nicely, in a very synchronized manner, Kuchh Acha Ho Jaye, Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye. Can you just talk a little on that? Because that's really very, very beautiful synergy I can see.
Thank you, Shripad. I think from a global perspective, as an organization, we had started dialoguing amongst ourselves the need to elevate and start talking about playing a larger role in the consumer's life and in the society around us. We did see quite a few large brands do that. We also felt that is something that we've been saying in an implicit way. We felt that we could play an explicit role as well. So I think there were a few things that were happening, and hence we picked up generosity as a broad purpose platform for brand Cadbury. That happened globally. And the global expression, the English expression was, there's a glass and a half in everyone. Now, generosity as a value is intrinsic to Cadbury. It's in the founding roots of the Cadbury family, and the way it manifests in the way the Cadbury family expanded across the world, and the way they ran the first Cadbury factory in Boneville in the UK. They were kind of textbook experts with Quaker roots of being generous, not only for themselves, but to the society at large and to their own employees. Quite a few pioneering things the family did way back in the early 20th century, late 19th century, as the way they were setting up practices. In those days, industrial Britain. So I think generosity was in our roots, so we built it up. Generosity is also in the roots of the Cadbury product, manifested by what we call the glass and a half icon on the front of the bag, which is made with glass and a half milk. So the original Cadbury block was a quarter-pound chocolate made with a glass and a half of whole cream milk, full cream milk. So it is part of the kind of icon, part of the founding attributes of the brand. So what we did is picked it up. So it came from within. It's not something that we invented. Came from within the core of the brand. And we said, let's bring light to it. Now, glass and a half in everyone is a very nice English phrase, but the turn of phrase has no relevance in a country like ours. It translated when we were doing our testing, and Ganpati and the team, everybody was closely involved. It translated as, "Isme 1.5 glass दूध है, मेरे को तो लगा था 2 glass दूध है." right? So people don't understand the glass and a half bit, right? So I think even at that point in time, as we got into the research, we were very clear that we didn't want to let go of Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye. So we said we wanted to find out our expression of generosity. I think in the journey, I think Ganpati and his team played a very, very critical role. And I think the first things that they discovered and came back and told us was the fact that actually in our Indian or Hindi roots, in our cultural roots, there's no actual word for generosity. It doesn't translate directly because it is so intrinsic in our culture. It is so inherent in our culture. Actually, there's no word called generous. The closest we could come to was achai, which then translates back in English as goodness, right? So that's the search, and maybe Guns will give a little bit more insight, the different words, the different expressions we searched. But eventually we felt that the best articulation was achai. That's how Kuchh Acha Ho Jaye, Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye got articulated. So, I mean, maybe I'll hand it over to Guns to talk about the origins, and then we'll come back and talk about how we have taken it forward.
So, like Anil said, I mean, the whole generosity thought process is a global process, and the brand is anchored on generosity. Bringing it alive in the Indian context, the challenge was the word generosity doesn't translate. There's no one single word which captures the idea, right? The closest word would be charity, which wouldn't cut it. I mean, generosity isn't about charity. That would give the wrong idea. And the closest word we could find is achai.
Correct, but achai can also become a little bit inward-looking in its manifestation. The external manifestation of achai is actually generosity.
Right. How do you bring it alive is where the trick is, right? I mean, the word achai in many ways allows you to talk about the product, the goodness of the product, and how that inspires the goodness in people. And goodness in many ways translates to many words, right? There's kindness, there is generosity, there is sweetness, and all of those things eventually, when they come together, is essentially what the essence of generosity is. So, without losing what people kind of connect with, Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye is the essence of this brand, and then figuring out how to say what the brand purpose is, which is generosity. We were able to do that very nicely with Kuchh Ho Jaye, Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye. It carries forward the vision, it conveys the essence of the purpose without giving up on all that the brand has built. So, it kind of transferred all the equity we have created over the years onto the newer platform quite seamlessly.
And I think, and then once the seamlessness came through, the seamlessness is reflected in our storytelling as well, right? So I think the challenge has always been that when you think about purpose and when you think about playing a little bit more purposeful role in a consumer's life and in society, you don't want to create a separate narrative which is not linked to what the brand is doing on a day in, day out basis, right? Because then you're just saying, okay, I'm making a nice creative. It has to influence everything that the brand does, right? So I think that seamlessness helped us architect an activation calendar, which is seamless. I think the other thing the seamlessness manifests itself into, again, for me, the power of an idea is if it manifests without a TV creative, right? Because then you know that the idea exists without having to tell a story around it, right? And that's what this told us. I mean, the moment we started talking about achai, being generous, right, inspiring people to be a little bit generous to each other, right? We uncovered so many insights, whether it is the Unity Bar, whether it is the Purple Heart campaign, whether all the work that we've done through Rakhi Diwali, right?
And thank you.
Especially in a country where there's a huge amount of power distance. It manifests itself into acknowledging the unacknowledged. If you think about the notion of acknowledging the unacknowledged, in a world, in a country which is growing at different rates for different parts of the country. And then, of course, turbocharged by what's happened in the last 3 years in COVID. But if anything, there is a sense of gratitude that we have. That we are where we are and we are not as badly impacted by many others. And also the fact that we are where we are because of some others who played their part. And I think it swept the nation with a sense of gratitude. And we only felt that this is the right time to be generous. So I think a few things have come together to give us also the clarity of how important this chapter is in our lives. And then while constantly pinching ourselves and reminding us that we are only a chocolate. That's what happens and that's the other seamlessness, Shripad, to say, Kuchh Acha Ho Jaye, Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye. let's not stop at acha, because then we get instructive, we get directive, we get prescriptive, it becomes kind of top down in the way you communicate, but that's not the intent at all. So, but let's do our small bits to make the world a more generous place, where we know that, in as much that we are comfortable, there are many others who are homeless, foodless, jobless. Can we do our bits in our own way, which is authentic to us? Because we've been doing this in the past as well. So I think those are the kind of elements that have come together. Much more so in festivals, because in festivals bring out our authentic self. That's at least one time of the year you say, now at least let me be generous. And the other interesting aspect of generosity is that, we are very, very generous to strangers and least generous to our loved ones, whom we take for granted. Right? Because of patriarchy, because of our cultural context, right? We just take so many things for granted, right? That again adds to the power distance. So I think those are the notions that make generosity come alive so much more naturally in festivals. Whether it is Rakhi, whether it is Diwali, and we talk about those who are not feeling acknowledged, for whom Diwali is not happening. That's how the idea of the small retailers came in 2021 and 2020, and again, because they are the people who are impacted. So I think it is also a very fertile space. We think there's lots that can be done. And, we really genuinely feel that we can do it. We have the platform. Yes, we'll generate business, but we are also helping because we think it's required. It's not because it's not coming out of a sense of charity. It's about sense of this is what we should be doing. This is our platform. Sorry, Gans, you were saying.
So when you think about it, Meetha and generosity are such compliments. When you eat something sweet, it brings out the goodness in you. It brings out generous side of the person, right? So, and that's probably something that's fitting beautifully in the context of, what's been happening in society in the last 2 years. The pandemic kind of needed people to be nice to each other, and that's kind of fueled all of the work that's come out of it. The goodness that from where this brand comes, the sweetness from where this brand comes, then kind of manifests as thank you, as the work we did for Diwali for the retailers, and likewise on Rakhi and so on and so forth. Purple Heart.
Yeah, I think, while we understood the complete story behind this story, so to say, of Kuchh Meetha Ho Jaye, and there is so much more to it than what one would have thought. And in fact, we have got a lot of principles and nuggets from this chat, which I'm sure a lot of our audience will like. And thank you very much, Anil. Thank you very much, Ganpati. It's been very, very interesting and enjoyable. It was really very, very sweet. Bahut meetha tha.
Thank you so much for having us once again. It was nice talking to you. Thanks,
Thank you, Ganu. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Very nice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shipal. Thanks, Anil.